To talk about my family story is going through more than 15 years of struggle, fighting for justice, grief, trying to get an education, speak about family loss in the most horrific circumstance, balancing life from being a child to a teenager, an adult, all in different circumstances and in different countries. Moving to a country where I couldn't speak the language, becoming part of the new culture, and many more obstacles along the way. So I thought the best way is to start from the beginning. I was born in the mid-80s in a small town in the north of Kosovo called Podujeva. By the time I was old enough to understand things, the situation in Kosovo had started to get worse. My school was taken away, my father was thrown out of work, and the family decided to emigrate to Sweden. And after living there for a year and a half, we were sent back to Kosovo. And then the war started. For me as a child, the war seemed like a movie, because I had full belief that nothing could ever happen to my family, because it was my family. And things like that just don't happen to my family. Unfortunately, it did. It was the 28th of March, 1999, 4 days after the NATO bombing. It was a Sunday, and it was Eid. I would be celebrating Eid with my whole family for the last time that day. We had been prepared for the war, I think. We had seen many convoys of tanks enter my town from the border with Serbia. And when we had heard gunshots and bombings in the distance, we had lay on the floor and turned the lights off when the gunshots had been heard close by. We were 8 children in my family, and I remember the younger ones laughing and making a lot of noise, and everyone trying to keep them quiet. I can't remember having any fear before the soldiers entered our home, but I do remember being afraid and having an odd, sad feeling the night before the massacre. We took refuge in my auntie's house. My youngest brother, Shpatim, who was 9 at that time, had always a lively, bright personality. He was always laughing and being silly. But on this particular night, he was very scared and had started to cry. When I saw him like that, it made me aware that the war was serious. So on the day of the 28th of March, my family and the family of our friend Enver Durici were rounded up in our neighbor's garden and deliberately shot at by a police reserve unit called the Scorpions. The same unit that took part in the Srebrenica massacre. I'm afraid I cannot speak of the details of that horrendous day, even though the memories are still vivid in my mind. For some reason, the older I get, the harder it becomes to speak about what I saw and experienced that day. In that garden, on that day, I lost my mother, Soila, my grandmother, Shahida, my brothers, Shpand and Shpatim, my auntie, Shefkate, my cousin, Nora, who's like my twin sister, my father's auntie, Nefise, her daughter-in-law, Fezdria, and Enver Durici lost his whole family, his parents, Hamdi and Esma, his wife, Itnete, and his 4 children, Albion, Dafina, Mimosa, and Harbour, who was only 2 years old. In that garden, there were only women and children. The only survivors were myself and my 4 cousins, Fatos, Yehona, Lydia, and Gantz. We were all very badly injured. I myself took 16 bullets in my arm, in my leg, and in my back. After the shooting, we were taken to Pristina Hospital, where we remained until the end of the war. We were all separated. The boys were taken in a different ward to the girls, and later we were informed that Liria was taken to Belgrade due to her horrific injuries. It was very difficult to go back home after the war, to go back to an empty house where once it was filled with people, happiness, and laughter. I thought I would never laugh again. I was too young not to be able to see the future anymore, and nothing made sense. But I was very lucky to have my father alive, and all my relatives, and later on my stepmother Aphrodita, who gave their everything to make a decent life for for us all. Due to my injuries, I was not able to feed, wash, or dress myself. I did not have the essentials of a human being's independence. So I always had this recurring thought in my mind of what was the point of living. Yehona had said, we somehow were meant to live and we were meant to tell our story. This is quoted in at the opening of our exhibition, which I will come to later. On the 10th of September, 1999, my cousins, our fathers, and I were medically evacuated to Manchester. At that time, Liria was still in Belgrade. As soon as we arrived into Manchester, Yehona and I were sent straight to hospital, and the rest were sent to a refugee camp, which included Kosovo Albanians. And a few months later, we were reunited with Liria. We were grateful that physically we were recovering and progressing, but what happened on that day was still not forgotten. We were struggling with hospital and getting an education, as well as trying to learn a language, which was very difficult, especially for two young girls. But life gradually started to get normal, and we managed to continue with our education. As life had started to feel partly normal, in 2003, we were contacted by Natasha Kandic from the Humanitarian Law Center in Belgrade, whom advised we should testify in Belgrade against two men who had taken part in the shooting, Sasha Svetan and Dejan Demirovic. There were long discussions on whether we should go, whether the trial would be fair, whether we would be safe. We asked if we could testify through a video link, which was not accepted by the court. And you have to bear in mind that we were all under the age of 18. But in July 2003, we decided to testify. It was important to tell the truth. It was important for those men who left us for dead 3 years earlier to face us. It was important to get justice for our family. The trial had started in Prosecuting, in a town south Serbia, but because the judge had been threatened, in June 2003, the trial was moved to Belgrade. They thought that this would be an easy case, so a female judge would be more suitable for the case. The trial had started on the same day as the Prime Minister of Serbia, Zoran Đinđić, was assassinated. So we were not convinced that Serbian police would protect us when they were not able to protect their own Prime Minister. And that was our only option. With this information, we were convinced that the police of Serbia had failed to protect their own Prime Minister, so how would they protect us? So we were supported by a Humanitarian Law Center, Manchester to Kosovo, and a BBC journalist, Paresh Patel, and our fathers. So we decided to go ahead and testify. We spent roughly 5 days in Belgrade, and it was very tough. We were never sure of our safety. We had to talk in detail of what happened that day in the garden. And we were to face the man that we last saw on the 28th of March, 1999. I turned 18 a few weeks before we went to Belgrade to testify, so I had the choice of having an open court. I decided to testify in open court because I wanted everyone to hear about what had happened to the family. So my turn came to give evidence. I was taken to the court room surrounded by security guards. I was made aware that the accused was in the corridor, so the bodyguards surrounded me, so I would not have to face him. Feelings of anger took over me, and I did want to face him and ask him why, and ask him how he felt that he was not going to be a free man, and that he could not stop us from telling the truth. How did powerless make him feel? So the time came. I faced him in the courtroom. He was sat about 3 or 4 meters away from the stand where I would testify. His whole family was sat behind him. For the 2 hours I testified, he never looked at me once. And at the end, when it was his turn to speak, he apologized with his head down, looking at the floor. It was a very surreal moment. It was a moment when I felt strong, and it was a moment where I realized that nothing can ever be lost or forgotten. And that this person is not stronger than me. Not even his gun 3 years earlier made him stronger than me. The trial had been successful, and the accused, Sasha Svetan, was convicted with maximum sentences of 20 years. And we became the first children to ever testify in a war crimes trial. But I hadn't given up there. Dejan Demirovic had escaped to Canada. That same year, I traveled to Canada to try and convince the Canadian government to extradite Dejan Demirovic to face trial in Serbia. And in 2006, he was sent back and turned state's evidence. Even though he didn't face the trial, we still believe that he took part in the shooting. In 2008, we testified for the second time, and 4 more men were convicted. 3 with maximum sentencing, and 1 with 15 years, because he was 18 at the time when he took part in the shooting of my family. It became very important to tell the story, but our biggest aim as a family was to tell our story in our own words, and we set this as an objective. In October 2011, we presented the family exhibition, Bogujevci Visual History, at the National Gallery of Kosovo, where we decided to tell our story as artists, with the help of our friend and curator, James Wormsley. The exhibition takes the viewer through the journey where it shows the family life before the war, our time spent in hospital during the war in Pristina, and our fight for justice. The exhibition then continued in Tirana in 2012, and last December in Belgrade. It has always been very important for us to send the exhibition to Belgrade, so people there would be able to learn about what had happened in Kosovo, how many families like mine had the same fate, and hoping that there will be an acceptance that killings took part in Kosovo. On the final part of the exhibition, there's a quote, and it says, "Now it is a new beginning. We can start our life again," given by the 4 of us. In Tirana, we were asked how we are going to move forward when we are still talking about the past. And our answer was that what we are doing is part of dealing with the past. Moving forward helps dealing with the past. Never forgetting helps you move forward. I never thought I would get past that day in the garden, but I did get here. And what got me here is kindness, compassion, family, friends, education, and most importantly, will and hope. Fajn